Welcome to a safe space between friends, where we get real about the highs, the lows, and everything in between. My name is Nikki, and this is my beautiful friend Myra.
What's up, everybody? How you doing? How you doing, Nikki?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm just grateful to be here, Myra, as always. How are you?
I'm amazing.
You are. You are absolutely amazing. What are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about what it means to be or feel invisible and to not feel or be invisible. Invisibility. What is that
Invisibility.
about? What does that mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have a scripture for us?
I do. I do have a scripture. Um it is Luke chapter 12, verse 7. Luke 12:7. My my phone shut down on me, so give me just a second. Okay. Luke 12:7. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So do not be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. We are worth a lot. We are worth a lot to God. And really that's what matters. But anyway, we'll get to that part.
Indeed, we will. Something that stands out about that scripture to me, though, when we read it the first time, it didn't really kind of stand out to me, but it now is that he's yet again commanding us to not be afraid.
Absolutely.
Yet again, yet
Absolutely.
again. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Before we were kind of getting caught up on like the hairs of the head and and the sparrows part, but the don't be afraid there just stands in itself, doesn't it?
It does. Because part of that, I think that fear part is so huge because a lot of us deal with that, just being real. And sometimes,
Yeah.
you
Um,
mentioned earlier about how sometimes we're invisible on purpose, but we'll get to that too.
yes, ma'am.
All right. So I guess we should start with this question for everybody. We want y'all to think about this. And, you know, um, if you want to leave us a comment in the chat, please do so. But we're going to answer this question. Has there ever been a time when you felt invisible? And you want to go? You want me to go first?
Yeah, well, first, if you don't mind, like, what is invisibility? What does that mean?
Okay.
To be invisible.
hmm
So, what does that mean to you, Myra?
Unseen, being unseen, even though your presence is there, your body is there, but it's as if You're not acknowledged. You're just overlooked, unheard,
And heard.
valued, dismissed. Yeah.
That's a great description words. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And when was a time that you felt invisible, that you felt dismissed or unseen or unheard or
Well, my first real job, I was a banker. I
her
worked
air
at
quotes, listeners, her air quotes, her
yeah,
real job.
real job because summer jobs don't count as real jobs when you're in high school and college. So this was a real job. I was a real adult. And I had applied for several promotions or leveling up, as you will, if you will. I started out as a teller, and I wanted to move into customer service, and then eventually move into loans, and eventually be a VP of the bank. I wasn't trying to be the president, but I was wanting to be a VP. And so, and there you have to take steps. And when I got to I made it through all of those levels, and when I got to the bank manager application part. I had all of the credentials. I had all of the experience. I had the education. I actually went to banking school because they used to have a banking school back in the day. Um,
Right.
and I had studied business administration and all of that. And each time I would apply, it was as if I didn't. Like, I really didn't even get an interview, but I watched other people of
Mhm.
genders and races be promoted before me, and they didn't have what I had. They didn't have the experience. They had never gone to banking school. Um, but they were, I'm just going to put it out there, they were white men.
Of course. Sure.
Um, and in one case, it was between me and a white lady, and she didn't have anything except for a high school diploma and a little bit of experience, and
Right.
she got promoted over me. And that's when I left that position.
Good
I
for
left
you.
that job because no, but I definitely felt invisible because no matter what I tried, how I tried to approach, and I worked at two different banks and it kept happening. So I left the banking industry because I felt like they didn't see me anyway. So I'm not going to waste my time or my gifts. So that's
Look at
what
that,
about you?
or your gift. That's right.
Mhm,
Well, hang on. We're gonna slow down because we're not gonna jump off of Myra just yet. If
mhm,
you don't mind just slowing down for a second. Um, First of all, Mara, thank you for being vulnerable with not just me, but with our listeners, and
absolutely.
sharing your experience, not only as a female, but as a woman of color.
Hmm.
Because what you've just done is you've just opened up a door for your bestie over here to talk about a word I've been dying to talk about.
Okay.
And that's intersectionality.
Hmm.
Okay. And what you just described. First of all, for our listeners, Miss Myra, um, if you don't mind sharing with us when you first entered this professional, your when you say first real job, we're really talking about that first professional job of you stepping out into the professional world, like you said, as an adult, right? So you were already qualified, like you said, you had went above some of the steps of some of these other people. But
Hmm.
what decade are we talking about here? Are we talking
Oh,
about like,
we are talking about late 80s, early 90s.
yes,
First got the job in 87, and this was probably about, I had been there about 1990
okay.
when I kept applying and kept applying.
That would
Mhm,
have been about my guess, but I didn't want to be the one to like throw those dates out there because it's not my story, it's yours. But that would have been about my guess, late 80s, early 90s.
mhm,
Um, I ask you that because it's important because this is the what you just described is discrimination on more than one level,
mhm,
right? You just described what's called intersectionality, which as a sociologist and as a clinician in the field of psychology, I have been so worried that it's going to become a dirty word, just like DEI has, or just like affirmative action has, where people are scared to use these terminologies because they're political. Again, air quotes, listeners. Um, it's not a political word, it's a sociological term. Intersectionality means that you have more than one level, right, of minority status. So you not only were discriminated against, you were overlooked, right? You were invisible to this in this banking industry by not only your color, right, because you were overlooked, but also a white female, right,
mhm,
who wasn't credentialed, but also by your gender, because there were also other males of different races, I'm assuming too,
mhm.
that very well probably weren't credentialed or that were just, taken over you in general. Like you were never going to be the option. You were going to be the very last option at minimum, right?
Correct. Mhm,
Okay. I asked you about that, the time frame for a reason. And it's like because we think that that was, so long ago. That was like my lifetime, a little less than, ago. And it's like, no, that's still happening today. And
absolutely.
some of those systems are being dismantled
Mhm,
today that put those protections in place so people like Myra would be able to get the promotions that she rightfully earned and was overly qualified for, would be
mhm,
my guess.
mhm,
I just know how Myra's work ethic too, so they
mhm.
were getting a whole package. I say this to say I am sorry that you are overlooked and were invisible. You are certainly not now, Myra Muckle. You've got the light of Jesus, if nothing else, shining through you that no one can ignore.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
But I thank you for sharing that story and allowing me to be able to just shed some, using your story to be able to shed light on an issue that is still very present today.
Hmm.
That issue is still very relevant.
Right.
And not just for the banking industry, listeners. We're talking about college applications, right? We're talking about like entry to get into college. We're talking about just getting hired in general,
Hmm.
um, loans, housing,
Hmm.
getting certain housing opportunities or car loans.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Um, yeah. So these types of discriminations affect us in all areas, not just in this promotion area. But Myra, you're
Even down to shopping. You
yeah,
know, who are they going to offer to help first? You know, you go and you're at. They don't know how much money you have or anything about you, but because of how you look, you just like you're not even there. They don't even see you. Um, and that's happened on more than one occasion. Just being overlooked because of an assumption or because they have one way of seeing things.
I think for myself too, being overlooked, and I told you I would share this. You kind of help bring this to light for me. Um, Having a disability and a chronic illness often for myself goes unlooked. It's unseen. I don't look like I do on paper. Matter of fact, when a new physician or a new provider walks in, they usually look like they had the wrong patient. And I know that, but at the same time, those disabilities are real. The debilitating factors that come along with disabilities are real. And sometimes I've been somewhat mistreated. I remember being in heart failure and also pregnant. It was right before I went into hospitalization at 28 weeks with my youngest, Meredith.
Mhm.
Um, but I was getting my oldest out of the car, who was 2.5 years old at the time. I was in heart failure again, and I parked in handicap in a handicap spot to go into the grocery store. And I remember this white male. It's only the white males I've ever been discriminated against, to be honest with you. That's why I'm always like, it's the white males. But it was a white male that said, I didn't know being pregnant was it was a handicap.
My goodness.
Well, look here, because I was already sick, and sometimes when you're being beat up on physically, and you got somebody else coming at you, I didn't carry Jesus in my pocket that day apparently because I pulled my shirt down and let him see my scar on my chest from my heart surgeries. And
Oh my,
I asked him, and I said, "Excuse me, how many heart surgeries do I have to qualify for to qualify for this parking spot?" To you is what I said to him. I was livid. It was like, oh, and it was like the heat of the summer. Like it was hot. I was hot. It wasn't like
mhm,
summertime, but it was a hot day.
mhm,
I was a heart failure. I wasn't playing with him, and I didn't respond the way I would have wanted to.
mhm.
But at the same time,
You needed
somehow,
to respond that way.
well, yeah, because I guarantee he walked away from there thinking, "Oh man, I can't believe she's." But at the same time, the same way with you, Myra, the fact that if you would respond and say you didn't give me this promotion because of my race and gender, they're not going to hear it. The people that act in those ways aren't hearing that anyway. You
Mhm.
know what I mean?
What was his response to you?
He was just stuck, and of course I kept on. He just moved on because I don't think he expected me to bite back in general. You know,
Got it.
um, you
That's right.
know,
If you're not supposed to, it's not ladylike.
correct,
And he's right.
correct,
Yes.
exactly. That's just another double standard. We could probably do a whole podcast on
Oh my
on
goodness.
double
We don't have enough time, do
standards.
we? To do my goodness.
Another example of intersectionality, though, not trying to make this podcast about that, but just taking it from out of race and just making it about gender and disability. So, as a heart patient, as a female heart patient, and y'all don't have to trust me, go look at the American Heart Association, look at their website, they'll tell you. The research isn't even for us women, the research is on men. And so, our symptoms are being ignored.
Mm,
right? So that's a form of discrimination and invisibility where you can't even tell me if what I'm experiencing on this is normal for me or not,
mhm,
because you don't do research on someone that still has a menstrual cycle on blood thinner, or you don't have the research that says this is what a 45-year-old female looks like when she's went, these things, because it's only on males. So a lot of our symptoms and a lot of women have lost their lives because of that, because
right.
of that discrimination. Heart
That's
disease is one of the number one. It is the number one killer of women, and it kills more women than all cancers combined. Um,
mhm.
and
I've
it's
read
because,
that.
yeah, and it comes down to we don't know our symptoms because the research is done on men. That's what it comes down to.
Okay,
Anyway,
interesting.
soapbox. I'm coming off of it now. Visibility, people. That's what we're talking about today.
Yes, yes, yes. But that's really good information, and I think a lot of people really don't know that, and um, a lot of people with a disability don't look like it, and so you
Don't.
that like, and we'll talk about this in another podcast, like what you low key judge people for, and that is one. Like now
Yeah.
she knows that she can walk. Like what is she doing? And you would never say. Most people would never say it, but they've judged you, and they don't
Oh,
know this.
I feel it all the time.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel it when people drive by thinking,
yeah.
yeah, when I'm loading my grocery or whatever the case is. I mean, I can feel it. Not that I park handicap all the time because I don't. I'm
Right,
usually one that walks further than I need to. But
right.
and it's more so just when I have my kids and I don't know how I'm going to feel when I come out of that store. Is really what it's about.
Good point.
Yeah.
You
And
don't
as
know.
a person with disabilities, you have to consider that, especially as a solo parent like I am.
Right. Yeah. And people don't think about that. People don't
I
really
can't
think about that.
Yeah, I can't afford to walk across the parking lot and push myself when I've got 2 littles and a grocery cart that is too heavy for me to be pushing anyway.
Right.
Um, right,
Right.
especially in the heat of summer. He
Yeah.
just going old boy, old man's just gonna have to be mad that I parked handicapped.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, he's just gonna have to get over it.
Just gotta
Get
get over it.
over himself.
Yeah, I'll tell you though, it's not even so much the heart stuff, it's the autoimmune. Autoimmune, they call it the invisible disease anyway, like the invisible disorder, because
Hmm.
they all go either misdiagnosed, untreated, and it doesn't matter who the person is. Like autoimmunes are just really complicated in general. Um,
Yeah. Okay.
and someone can be in a flare up and look completely normal, but be completely debilitated.
Hmm. Hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so for a second, if you don't mind, I would like to go back because I was just curious about something. I want to go back to the Bible verse.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I wanted to look at why in that particular verse it compares the hairs of our head to the sparrows.
Oh,
Our
good
work,
one.
I'm like, okay, and I've read that verse many, many times. It's in Matthew and it's in Luke. And I just
Right.
was like, what does that actually mean? So this is what I found in under the Bible app. It says in the Bible, God's comparison of the hairs on our head of your on the hairs, I'm sorry, of the hairs on your head to sparrows, as in you are worth more than many sparrows. It emphasizes God's meticulous care and knowledge of even the smallest details of his creation, highlighting the immense value he places on human beings.
Mhm. Well,
And that,
and like you said
that makes so much
before
sense to me.
well, yeah, and like you said before, like when you were like, "Nick, can you even count the hairs on your head?"
Hmm.
Um, like, it's excessive too, right? So it's not like even just the finer details, it's the excessive part of those finer details,
Hmm.
that he's like, "I'm taking account for this. Like, I care enough about you to notice every single one of those fine details."
And
Um,
and when we are unseen or invisible
mhm.
to someone, it just said that says to me that they don't really care
Right.
about anything about us. And
You
that's
don't
why
matter.
we can't look to people for value. Maybe
Correct.
I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's what I
Not
feel
at
right
all.
now. Second, that's why we don't look to people for value. We look to God
Exactly.
for our value, you know. So,
Amen.
anywho,
Come
all
on,
right,
Myra.
yeah, I like that. So,
Me
all right,
too.
what do you have next? Like, what comes up for you next regarding invisibility?
Well, you kind of already kind of started talking on it for me. It's like, how do we make ourselves visible? Because like I shared an inappropriate way in which I made myself visible, right? With the whole parking spot. But like
Mhm.
how do we and you shared about how you made yourself visible. You exited the house, which is what as talked about in Matthew 2. You exited the house where you didn't find your peace. You left it there. You dusted yourself off and went somewhere else, right? But
Right.
how do we make ourselves seen where we are? How do
Mhm.
we make ourselves seen in a way, in a manner that we're okay with? How do we make ourselves seen that's impactful, I guess? Because that's what really matters to Nikki and Myra is like the impact we make for the kingdom of God, right?
Mhm.
So how do we feel seen and heard for him, I guess? How do we do that?
How do we? How do we what?
How do we feel? How do we become visible, right? How do we,
To to people, to ourselves, like
I mean,
visible
just in general.
in general. How do we become visible? Good question. I think setting boundaries and not um
Mhm.
accepting being invisible, like standing up for ourselves, speaking out. Um if you have to change positions, but really just taking a stand, um and trusting God in the process. I mean, it says that God can put us in places that man won't even understand. Like, why are you here? And why do we see you? We didn't see you before. We didn't see you last year, but now there you are. And
Mhm.
God is capable of doing that. He's done it so many times for people. We were talking earlier about Sarah and Haggai,
Yeah.
and how quick just to sum it up real quick, Abraham was promised that he was going to be the father of many nations, that he and his wife would have a baby, but they were old, and Sarah got impatient, so she had her handmaid sleep with Abraham so that he could have his firstborn son, blah blah blah. And when the girl got, Hagar is her name, when she got
Okay.
pregnant, Sarah told Abraham, you got to get rid of her. So he sent her away to the wilderness, and God showed up and said, I see you. She called on him and he said, I see you. And when God shows up and when God sees us and places us in certain positions, we will never be invisible again, ever. Like
Amen.
he sent her back to Sarah and to Abraham, and she had the baby, and her son was actually Abraham's firstborn.
Ishmael.
Promised one, Ishmael.
Yeah. I
The, the,
probably ain't
the
saying it right.
promised child between Sarah and Abraham was Isaac, and he was actually the second born. He probably should have been the firstborn, but because, Sarah wanted to play God or whatever. That's my own opinion, y'all. Don't
Sarah wanted to play God.
even start. Um,
She took control in her own hands.
she did, but
That's what you mean by that. Like that's what I hear you say when you say
yeah,
that.
yeah, she was impatient. That can kind of happen when you get impatient, but that's
Yeah.
another podcast. And
True.
so, but God saw her when he came and said, I see, he said, I see you. It's almost verbatim, and it may be, different depending on the version of the Bible.
No,
But
but that's what I read too.
yeah, that's what he said. So
It's
when
Genesis
God
2, by the
sees
way.
us, yeah, when God sees us, that's all that really matters. Um,
Well, I think it goes back to what you had said prior to this example, but I think this example really kind of, just kind of adds value to what you're saying, is that it's what we how we value ourselves,
Absolutely.
right? We have to know who we are and stand in our own truths and our own authenticity.
Mhm.
And when you do that, what anyone else thinks really doesn't matter.
It really does.
Um, be-
It does.
um, even even at our lowest moments, even at the times when we don't know, like our most confusing times when we think we've got something figured out, and then we're just like, yeah, that wasn't it. What's
Mhm.
next or whatnot? Um, we still can find value, or we still should find value in ourselves. Like it shouldn't, our value should never be tied up in one thing or one person or one aspect of our lives.
Correct.
Because the moment we can't, what did it say, perform,
Mhm.
right? The moment we can't perform to that or fulfill whatever that expectation is, then we've just devalued ourselves before we ever even had a chance of adjusting to that circumstance.
Mhm.
Because we place so much value, we put all of our value in that one place.
Right. That's true. Very. It's very true. Okay. So I kind of want, and I may be backtracking a little bit, but this is kind of standing out to
Yeah.
me. And I want to read it because I just like to read things sometimes. It says, um, what are some reasons that we feel invisible, right? We've
That's
talked
good.
about some of that, but this says common reasons people feel invisible: rejection,
Mhm.
trauma, family systems, and workplace marginalization are just a few examples that maybe our audience hadn't thought of. You know, being something traumatic happening to you. Um, and then you feel like, well, that's all I'm worth, so I might as well just, nobody really cares about how I'm feeling, or, I've been overlooked time and time again. Something as,
Or
something
I
at,
can't. Sorry.
no, go
Um,
ahead.
I was
I know
just
you.
gonna say, I've heard, and you've heard the same thing, working trauma work too, Myra.
Mhm.
Um, you know, that they can't believe that it happened, or they can't, hang on, what was I gonna say? Um, they're not gonna be believed. Someone's not gonna believe them. They're not gonna believe their story. They're not gonna,
Yes.
just not being able to have a safe place to be able to share their
Mhm.
trauma,
Yes.
can make someone feel very invisible and isolated. Um, and that's what we're talking about here with invisibility and trauma, is really the isolation component to it.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Mm.
And not being valued.
Well, and the devaluation as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
not being
yes.
valued. Yeah. And
Or
after.
being told to get over it. So even someone that's not been like abused. So take a trauma. Let's look at a trauma that like a car accident, right? I've
Mhm,
known people that couldn't even that had a hard time trying to adapt to learn to drive
mhm,
afterwards, and
mhm.
they were then being told by their loved ones to get over it. Like
Exactly.
it's been a year since your car accident. What do you mean you can't drive?
Mhm,
And it's like, wow, that was really like I
mhm,
don't even
mhm.
feel understood at this point. Like,
Right.
yeah.
Like in the past, I've actually had a client who had several wrecks on Jesse Jewell Parkway here in Gainesville.
Ooh,
So much so, she will not drive. And it's been years ago. And I happened to run into her at Walmart. And I was just checking in. How you doing? Blah, blah,
yeah.
blah. And what she said to me was, I've still not driven on Jesse Jewell Parkway.
Well,
And people would think that was stupid. Like, get over it. No,
right.
she can't at this point. She can't right now. Because when she's there, all she remembers is the trauma. And she's
Right.
triggered.
So why put herself through it
Exactly. So what
if
if
it's
she
not
has
debilitating her in any way? That's how we would assess. Is
if
it
she has to go all
debilitating your lifestyle?
right, right. Even if she has to go all the way down to Oakwood and come back around to
Well,
get to the mall, then
whatever.
choice. Right.
It's
We
called time management at that point.
can't. True, very true. But yeah, that just made me think about her. Yeah, you could be judged, but like people want you to just get over everything. And
Yes.
not for you, but for them because they're uncomfortable.
Well, that's essential. Like we know, we understand that. But when you're in that moment of the person that's not being heard, or you're not being, taken, your experience isn't being taken for what it was. It's hard to kind of see it that way. When you're
Yeah,
actively living
I
it.
guess I guess I just want people to know that, like, if they're feeling
Yeah.
that, a lot of times what people how they respond to you, it's really not about you, but it's about them and their comfort.
Hmm.
And I think that's
You're
important.
right, Myra. That's a good point because look at grief. People will run from grief, honey. They'll show up for that funeral, but go sit with you by themselves somewhere. Nope, they do not want to hold that
Yeah,
space. It's uncomfortable. There's
yeah,
nothing fun about holding space for someone that's lost someone.
mhm.
But at the same time, like there's nothing more vulnerable. There's nothing
Right,
more sacred.
and nothing more rude than telling them to get over it. Your mama's been dead 5 years. You need to get over it. Right, that part.
That part, Myra.
That
Sorry, listeners, my face.
that part. So, okay, so we've talked about what it means to be invisible and to be
Yeah.
visible. So, walking people through the steps, how would we help them get to that level of, I guess, confidence?
I think I think you just answered your own questions, what it sounded like to me, girlfriend.
What
Um,
was the answer?
Confidence. I think you have to know who you are. I think it comes from a place of not just knowing who you are, but knowing what God says about you and
Ex-
having faith in God's promises. Because
ex-
Nikki will be the first one to tell you. People say, you're always so, like when I go to cardiac rehab, they're like, you're always so positive. I'm like, any good thing you see in Nikki Alamani is the grace of God, it is the Holy Spirit, because I'm ornery. I'm mean. I don't even like people. I'm just kidding. I love all y'all because Jesus told me I had to.
Yes,
But
yes, yes.
my point is that, like, I, as a human, don't have some superpower just because I have a positive attitude today. I have rough days, I have life happening. But God says I am someone different my exes say, or what my mother may have said, or what an ex employer may have said, or
Yeah.
that client that's still mad at me. Whatever, whatever the case is, it
Mhm,
doesn't matter. It what matters is what God says Nikki is, and what God says Nikki's purpose is. And
mhm.
it's up to Nikki to stand in that fulfillment,
Right.
through obedience, in my opinion,
Very good.
and faith. And I can't, if I'm worried about, it comes down to this, Myra. If Nikki is sitting back worrying about what other people are thinking, then
Mhm.
I'm serving more than one person, and that's not what he's called me to do.
Right.
I'm to serve one, which ultimately ends up serving more than, it ends up serving his people. But
Right.
I'm only to please one person. I'm not
That's
to
right.
be a people pleaser.
That's right. Exactly. And we
And
can
so
count.
sometimes being seen means that some people aren't going to be happy about it. And that's okay too. That's their stuff. Like Myra reminded us. Sometimes when people have a reaction to something you say, especially as a woman of color,
Mhm.
say it. That means
Yeah.
it needs to be said because
Yeah.
someone's trying to silence you.
Right.
What
Right.
did we say in a previous podcast? If you're feeling shamed, you're being oppressed.
Mhm. Mhm. So
So,
I was just thinking about this. You know how at the end we always say, um, until next time, friends, be a safe space for someone else, right?
yes.
And I want to challenge the audience with this. How can you make someone feel visible? How can you make someone feel seen? What can you do to make someone feel seen? And if I had to answer that question myself, I think it can be just as small as a smile when you're walking by someone and just
Our,
smiling at them. Go
that
ahead.
right there alone, or holding the door for someone else, or stepping out of the way first, right, and letting someone else walk by. I
Mm-hmm.
can't tell you how many times I've seen that, and that happens on on a racial bounds too. I've sit back and watched it throughout my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Watch when when you're in public and two different people are walking and one steps around. Um, I think you're right, Myra. I think it's allowing someone to share their experiences regardless of your opinion,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you want to help, if you want to help someone be visible, just let them be authentic. Let them be the real them, um, even if that real them changes.
Mm-hmm. 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 Sometimes just listening. Don't say anything.
That
Just be
too.
quiet. Just be
Yep.
quiet. And even just like reminding them of who they are to God. Because when you're in the middle of something, sometimes you forget. And just reminding them what God says about them, how much He loves them, what He sees in them, why He created them. They have purpose. They are enough. Those types of things. Just sometimes, I've been in a bad space. I'm pretty confident now, but every now and then I get in a bad space, and I have a friend. She'll send me a text and say, "This is just a reminder. You are enough."
Yeah.
And she didn't. I mean, that may not seem like a big deal,
Hmm.
but it is a big deal.
But it's a
Something
big deal.
that simple. When
Yeah.
God lays someone on your heart, that doesn't mean you always got to call them or anything. Just send them a little text or give them a call if they don't text. Hey, I was just thinking about you, checking in
Hmm.
with them. How you doing? You know, um, that's it's small, but it's big, and it
Well, I
can
think
change their day. Yeah.
you're right, and it's allowing them to know that they're just not alone, and regardless of whether it's we talk about this all the time, a positive or a negative circumstance in their life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes just holding space for both of those things, like you
Right.
having a new grandbaby, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's so exciting. Um, but those things, we hold space for people in different ways, right?
Exactly.
Um, but
Exactly.
uplifting others is kind of what you were describing, and you're so good at that, Myra. Oh my gosh, that
Yeah.
is just a gift that you're just so good at. Just that your demeanor in general, but you're really good at like reminding people of who they are and like reminding people of what God says about them.
Yeah.
Um,
I really do see
and
that
obedient to that.
as a gift that I have. So sorry.
No,
Um, um, I do, and I know it comes from God. I know that it does because really, I'm naturally shy and introverted, and if I don't have to make eye contact, it's fine with me. But I know it can change someone's day. Just a smile. How you doing? Nice to see you.
well, that's one of the authentic things about you, though, Myra, and I think that's one reason why it does you are so helpful and you are so impactful is really the word I'm trying to come up with, is impactful, is because you are intentional. Flying out giving compliments or just out here just like you're intentional with what you say, and it comes from a place of authenticity, and so
Right.
you're allowing people to actually really be seen whether you know them or not, you know
And
um
Nikki, it just gives me joy to
mhm.
do it, to make someone feel seen, and I just believe, it doesn't take much. It doesn't cost anything. Someone told me a long time ago, a smile is free,
They're free all day. Yeah.
free all
And
day. So,
contagious too. The
and
mirror you're on.
yes, that's
Mhm.
good, Nikki. That's good. All right, peeps. It's about that time. Anything you want to close out with, ma'am?
No, ma'am. I just
No?
appreciate you,
Mhm, I appreciate you.
and I appreciate you seeing me and hearing me and being
Same.
my friend and my safe space,
Yeah, it's
and
mutual.
listeners.
Yeah. So I will say this to close us out. I just want the listeners to know that um, you are not invisible, And if no one sees you, know that God does. He sees, he knows, and he loves everything about you. And you can count on that. That's where your value should be. Um, in that, it shouldn't be in if you didn't get the promotion at work, or if you were overlooked, or if no other person saw you, or they discounted your disabilities and the fact that you're a woman, because that happens a lot more than I think we actually realize. God sees it, and God is able to put you in places that no man or person can take you down from or out of. His plan for you is good. All right. Are we
Yeah,
done? Is that it?
that's it.
All right. So thanks to all of our listeners for your valuable time, your attention. And if you have any questions on the topic, just email us. If you have a request or a topic that you want us to address or talk about or bring to the table, just email us at a safe space between friends at gmail.com. And remember that if you need a safe space, call 988, and it's accessible 24/7, 365 days of the year. Just give them a call. They're there for you. They're good people there, and they're ready to help you. So until next week, friends, be a safe space for someone else. And we're going to add to it today, Nikki. Um, Help someone feel like they're being seen. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, absolutely.
Until next time, Nikki, I will see you later, ma'am.
All right. See you. Thank you, listeners.